Hi, I'm Martin Jarvis, and once again I want to welcome you to another perspective. Fear, failure, freedom, redefining your worst moments. That's what we're going to talk about today. We live in a world, especially social media and the 24-hour news cycle, and just folks with their cell phones and their ability to text and respond to each other. You can't hardly make a mistake without everyone finding out about it. See, when I came up, we didn't have cell phones. There wasn't social media. There wasn't a 24/7 news cycle. You could make mistakes, and they weren't recorded. I feel sorry for the young people today. You have to really be on your P's and Q's not to mess up, because somebody is going to record it, and all the world will know. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because I think that we just simply need a clarity of mind, a clarity of feeling. It seems that we're always trying to keep our best foot forward, and that's good. We used to especially do that on our first date, coming up. You don't want to share any of your negativities, any of your failures, any of your fears. You wanted to always look like you had it going on, And it seems like so that you finally being in a relationship and your mate, your partner, begins to see all kinds of flaws in you, all kinds of fears, all kinds of failures. And they see things in you that they really didn't know had previously existed because we kept them secret, But I want to share today is that everyone is afraid at times. Everyone fails. And the only people who are not afraid are people who don't try anything. The only people who never fail are the people who don't try anything. Failure and fear are necessary components of success and bravery. Because the first thing we need to realize is that, especially with fear, that the absence of fear is not bravery. Bravery is only if you are fearful and you do it anyway, okay? And so that's a good lesson. Because most of us that have experienced fear in our lives weren't always brave. Some of us were hardly ever brave. Some haven't been brave yet. But what I'm suggesting is that fear is the experience necessary in order to overcome fear and accomplish whatever you need to accomplish, in spite of the fears, okay? I know my daughter, coming up in the 11th grade, her and her classmates were on their way to St. Thomas. And they were going to be living on a boat for 2 weeks. And she wanted her scuba certification, just so she could scuba in St. Thomas. Well, I happened to be off that week, when she was telling me about it, and it was in November. We were able to get a hold of an instructor. It was his last class of the season before winter. And she was able to enroll in that scuba diving class. That was great. The only problem was that my daughter needed a dive partner. So guess who else is scuba certified? Became scuba certified when I was 62 years old. But it was interesting. So the scuba classes was about a week-long classes in a swimming pool, learning all the safety measures, all the ways to do this and the way to do that, all the stuff you had to do to be a scuba diver. But in order to actually get your certification, you had to make 5 qualifying dives in an actual body of water, okay? And so that's what we did. We went out there, and it was cold that day, but it wasn't a normal November, so it was a little bit warmer than normal, and we had our wetsuits on. We were getting ready to do our qualifying dives, and we did the first dives, and we had to do certain things under the water. I can't even remember what it was back then. And that 5th dive, we had to jump off of a pier with all of our gear on. And so all of us had jumped in the water. We were all in the water waiting, and my daughter was the last one. And she was standing on the pier, and she was just standing there, and then she jumped. And what she told me after the fact was that when she was standing there, she was standing there crying. Now we didn't know it. Everybody was wet. We had our mask on. She had her mask on. We didn't know. I didn't know. She said she was crying because she was really uncomfortable jumping off a pier with this oxygen tank on her back. So she was just standing there crying. And then she jumped. She said she realized there was no other way to get her scuba certification if she didn't do that last dive. So despite her fears, she jumped. And she learned a great lesson that day. What she learned that day, which she would have never learned had she not been afraid, is that when there is something that needs to be accomplished, you may be afraid, but you can't let that fear paralyze you. That's what she learned that day. So she wasn't ashamed of being afraid, and you shouldn't either. Even if you were afraid and you did paralyze, and you didn't accomplish what needed to be accomplished, next time you may not be paralyzed, and you may be, but the next time and the next time, eventually you're going to get over it, because you're going to realize that fear is only within your mind, and it can't harm you. And whatever it is that needs to be done, you're going to do it. Lesson learned. You can't learn that lesson without having faced fear, without having even failed fear. My daughter failed fear that day for a moment. For about a minute, she failed. And then she overcame it. Some folks' failure may be a week, maybe a year, maybe 10 years, but it's a lesson learned. And it's a very valuable lesson and experience to have been fearful. So don't be ashamed of that. As far as failure, come on, who hasn't failed? In order to be successful, really successful, you're going to have a string of failures. But that string of failures, to me, it's not that big a deal. A lot of times in life, we stand, like the old poem, before two roads, not knowing which one to take. Well, I'll tell you what, if you start taking one of those roads and then there's a roadblock, now the answer is simple. That wasn't the way to go. See, I never took failures personally. I don't care what it is. If I have to make decisions, if I have to do something and it doesn't pan out, oh well. Either that wasn't what it was meant to be, or whatever mistake I made in the process that I've identified, I won't make that mistake again. But whatever happens, you cannot change the past. So there's no reason to lament failure. There's no reason to lament fear, because you can't change what has already happened. All you can do is use those experiences to prepare you to overcome fear next time, or not to make the same mistakes that created the failure in your journey. Simply take another path. For real. It's not an issue. And then we might get deeply philosophical with this and ask ourselves, did you really have a choice not to fail? Did you really have a choice not to be afraid, or was this simply your destiny? There are other ways to look at it. Like you look at your life, like I was thinking the other day, if I had never partaken of the buzz, I probably would have been a nuclear physicist or something great, but would I have? We don't know. All we can know as we walk this path is when roadblocks come up, barriers pop up, mistakes, breaks in the road and all that we recognize it. We adapt. If we trip, pick ourselves up and continue walking. And we won't make that mistake the next time. Maybe that was our destiny. Maybe we had no choice. This is what we were supposed to walk through, and we were going to learn the lesson or repeat the failure. But eventually, we'll learn the lesson. So it's not a bad thing. I mean, that's the way I go through life, man. Even throughout my life, as I look back. I joined the military at 17, and I was just out there having fun, doing all the things that I wanted to do. There were no rules for me. And I failed a whole bunch of times. But I never lamented the failures. I just got back up, learned the lesson from that failure, and kept on going. Then one day, later in life, I had this epiphany that just wasn't the person I was supposed to be, and this is why I was failing so many times in these areas. I mean, I was always doing well, I was always had a good job, always working well, but I was never right up there at the top where I could have been. It took me a while, but I learned that lesson. Everything, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the failure. You cannot change the past. You don't have an opportunity really to deal with it. You don't have time, the luxury to sit there and lament about the failure or the fear that's already passed that can't be changed, man. And I don't know where I got this attitude from. Maybe it was my martial art training. To where, we used to love to fight back in the day. I practiced the martial art. I started back in the Bruce Lee era. So we just loved to fight and be cool, And so you might have a game plan when you're walking into a fight. And you start. But if your game plan doesn't pan out, if it's not working, you don't have the luxury to sit back and think, oh man, that didn't work. No, man, because you're fighting at the moment. You're going to get hit. So at the moment it doesn't work, and you might try it 1, 2, or 3 times. If it's just not going to work, you have to, in real time, at that moment, come up with a quick game plan if you don't want to get smashed. Okay? You don't have time to worry about why it didn't work. You just have to figure out what's going to happen now. And that's the way it is in life for me, for every single thing. I don't care if it's relationships. I don't care if it's jobs. I don't care if it's physical. If something happens to me, to a piece of my body, I get injured, I get wounded or something like that, I'm not going to worry about the injury or the wound. I'm immediately going to try to figure out, what am I going to do next? How am I going to make this work? How am I going to survive? It's never, ever, ever lamenting the failure. It's never, ever lamenting the loss, okay? That will simply solidify your failure, solidify your loss, and it will never get better. No, recognize what's going on. You just lost something. What are you going to do now? That's it. You don't have time. And that's what I praise my kids. People even think I was harsh because they'd be crying, and I'm like, what's the crying going to do? What is your crying going to accomplish? Now, I don't mean a heartfelt pain, over the loss of a loved one or something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if it doesn't work out for you, or even if you got hit, if you got hurt, what's crying going to do? No, get up and figure out what you're going to do. At least you get hit again, right? That's all I'm talking about. Let's see. How about being an expert shot? Marksman. I was an expert marksman in the military. I mean, I wasn't like those guys you see on TV, hit a target at a mile away and all that stuff. I think if you hit like 98 out of 100 with the M16, that was considered a marksman, so I got my expert marksmanship ribbon. But nobody was a marksman to begin with. You have to learn, you have to miss, you're going to miss, you're going to figure out, why did I miss it? And correct. I remember we sat down there when I was at basic training, and we were shooting the M16. And we were all lined up on the ground, and we had our own particular targets lined in front of us, and we were all shooting our target. And by the time the shooting was done, this one guy, he had only hit like 30 out of the 100, right? But the guy next to him, he hit like 150 out of 100. How'd that happen? Because this is a true story. Because the guy next to him said, oh, I'm only supposed to shoot at that one target? He was shooting all the targets. But anyway, that was a true story, man. But see, it takes failure to become an expert. It takes failure to become good. Look, even at speaking right now, I think I'm a pretty good speaker. Whether I'm speaking to a camera or I'm speaking to a multitude of people, I've done both. But I'll tell you what. The way it all started was I used to have a feeding program from some kids that were bussed in from the inner city once a week. And a guy joined my program that was fresh out of prison. And he was a good guy. He had been reformed in prison or found religion in prison. He was a good guy. And he said, hey Martin, I got this lady I want you to meet. She does a mentoring program through the juvenile detention centers every week, and I want you to meet her. I said, okay, that sounds cool. So I went down there to meet this lady. and it was at a gymnasium on a Sunday with a room full of kids that were incarcerated. And they're all sitting there in their little orange jumpsuits, and about 40 of them in folding chairs in that gymnasium. And I'm just there to watch. And the woman running the thing, she looks at me and says, Martin, say something. I mean, I wasn't prepared or anything. I'd never done anything like that before. But I stood up in front of all those young people and the counselors and the guards, everybody in there, and I started talking. And I would love to say I spoke to something profound, something deep, something earth-shattering, but what I spoke was a mess. It was a confusing, jumbled mess, and it didn't even make any sense what I was saying. And then I sat down. But I wasn't embarrassed. But before I sat down in that chair, I knew that was the place that I was supposed to be. It wasn't even looking at the future for any reason. What can I get out of it? All this kind of... No, I just knew, speaking to those young people, it just touched me so much. I knew even though I failed terribly, and some of them were laughing, nothing made sense. It didn't seem what I was saying. I knew what I was thinking, but it just wasn't working. I wasn't ready to do that. But I knew I was supposed to be there. And 17 years of that, I missed 4 weeks in 17 years. That's how important that was. So I calculated it just before this program here. So I spoke to young people about 880 times before a group of people. I became good at it. But I wasn't good at it when I began. Even after I first started, I still wasn't good at that. So as I was coming for the coming weeks after that, man, I was motivated and driven. So I would write up all this stuff that I would be thinking and studying, stuff I could give to these young people. And I'd have like 6 or 8 pages, handwritten pages, and I would actually spend 4 and 5 days memorizing word for word the words on those pages. Short-term memory and all. I learned that. And that's what I did. And so I would memorize that. I'd get for those young people, and I would just quote back everything I had written, memorized word for word. And I did that for a few months. But that really wasn't, I wasn't feeling like that was it. So then I started, I used to have coffee like a couple times a week with a buddy of mine. We'd just meet, at like Panera Bread or somewhere and just talk about things. And I got to thinking one day, when I talk to my friend, I don't need a script. We talk about things, and we talk for 2 and 3 hours about things. I don't need a script. So do I really need a script when I'm talking to these young kids? Yes. No. I thought, no, maybe I don't need a script. So rather than a script, I just sat down before I went to juvenile detention that week, and I just wrote down bullet points, maybe about 8 bullet points of things that I wanted to talk about. Or if I had sat down with my friend, I would have had no problem discussing those bullet points. So that's what I did. Walked into detention, started talking, and it was just like holding a conversation. Because I knew what I was talking about. So let me just talk about this, and I just talked about this, and I talked about that in front of those young people, and it worked. And then I continued. About the same time, I was doing this program on local cable television, and every week. And so I calculated, that turned out, as I calculated back, I did that for like 20 years, and I'm still doing it today, as a matter of fact. This program is going on local cable as well. And so I've done that like over 1,000 times, more than that. So I was not able to speak to those young people, but time and time again, speaking and speaking and speaking, the practice and practice, failure sometimes, I just got good at it. As well, I was an elder and a staff pastor in a local church, and I would speak to the congregation. So I mean, you're talking about thousands of times I've spoken before people. But the first time, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's an absolute failure. But you don't lament about it. You don't worry about it. And I'll tell you one other time. I don't know. This is memory lane here. This was not planned. But one of the times I went to juvenile. Well, the night before, man, I mean, I was getting all cleaned up. I had this real nice gray suit and a burgundy shirt and this gray kind of tie with a rose imprint on it, looking really cool. I got a really nice haircut, shaved real good. I mean, I was looking good. I couldn't wait to get to juvenile to speak to those young people. I got in front of those, and I knew I was looking good. When I got up to speak before them, I was just sharp. And it just didn't work. I tried to talk to these, it just did not work, man. It was ridiculous. I couldn't get it together. I couldn't get my thoughts together. And that was that. And as I sat down back in my chair, before my butt hit that chair, I knew what had happened. My motivation was no longer about them. My motivation was about how I was looking. And I was looking good. But see, that doesn't work for me. Because in order for me to do a good job, for me personally, I have to have a heart for the folks that I'm speaking to. I have to really have a desire, a concern to help folks be well. And that draws out of me all of the passion, all of the depth of goodness and all the stuff I want to impart into folks. It's my concern for them. So when I walked up there that day thinking all about myself, I wasn't even thinking about them, and there was nothing to draw out. because I was consumed in myself. Now, other people, they don't have a problem with it, I'm sure, especially actors and a lot of preachers and motivational people and whatever. But for me, I have to feel it. I can't be passionate. I can't flow unless I feel, what I'm doing. And so I failed. So what did I learn that day? I think I had been doing juvenile probably for about 5 years at that particular time. So I still did it about 12 years after that, and still, all this many years on TV and in front of a church and church people and all that. But I never made that mistake again. So that failure, I didn't lament that failure. Even before I sat down in that chair, I didn't lament it. I appreciated the failure, because the failure shared with me an issue that I was having, that I was never going to make that mistake again. And so I shared that with you to understand your strength is in your failures. Your strength is in your fears, because that's what you learn from. And even when you become a parent, if you are a parent, your biggest mistake is to conceal your failures. Your biggest mistake is to conceal your past fears. That's what your children need. They don't need to hear all your victory stories. They don't need to hear all this and all that. They need to hear where you failed, because that's what they're going through. They need to hear when you had fear and you still prevailed. That's what they need to hear. That's what people need to hear. Man, let me share. When I was like 14 years old, I started getting that buzz. You know what I'm talking about. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. And I think I got that buzz from age 14 to age 28. So all through the military, and many people did back then. That was the 70s. But from the time my parents found out when I was 14, my father was mad at me. He was a successful man. He was an educated man. He was a man of authority. And he recognized that he felt I was just messing up my life. And he was always just mad at me because I was getting that buzz. But years later, after my father had passed away, and I had already stopped doing that by then, but I was sitting in the church with my mother during the funeral, and she told me that my father was raised in the Bronx in New York, and she said that when he was a kid, when he was a teenager, he smoked weed. And I was really amazed. And I was thinking, why didn't he tell me, Because to me, if my father had told me that he had once did what I was doing, what I was experimenting with and starting to like, if he had told me that he had done it, I would have put more weight on his word. As far as I was concerned, he never tried it before. He just didn't know how good it was. And that was it. But if he had told me, I would have believed him, because he would have told me that he experienced it. Man, I raised my kids. I didn't hold back from them. I shared with them that part of my life. And guess what? They don't. Okay, my son might do other things, but they don't do that. And I'm suggesting is the best message, the best encouragement, the best boost to an individual's morale and being a cheerleader in their corner as they're attempting to face life and business trials, whatever they're going through, is to share with them your failures. Your failures are stronger than your victories. Your fears are stronger than the times you've been brave. And aside from that, even when talking about fears, there is no bravery if there is no fear. So don't hide that you've been afraid. Don't hide your failures. Your children, other people are looking to you that you're successful. You're doing what they wish they could do. I go through that all the time at work. It's like this. The guys would be saying, that's different for you because you got this or you got that and all this stuff. I'm saying, man, you haven't seen the path. You don't know the path from which I came, man. I'm telling you, I've come up that way. I understand what's going on. You can't even be a good leader unless you have failures behind you, because failures create within you empathy and understanding. If you're forever just hiding your failures and acting like you've always been successful and all this stuff, you lose that empathy. You're not even functioning in truth and reality. You can't be a good leader. A good leader is one who empathizes, who recognizes that, yeah, I've been right where you are. I've been in the place of failure, but I can give you the encouragement and the assurance that if you just get up and keep going, you're going to attain your goal. You can't give them that assurance if you're hiding your failures. And if you have failures, don't worry so much. If you're not getting that assurance for somebody else, take that assurance from me. You will be well. And that failure is what gives you strength. And it's all a matter of perspective. You can look at lifting weights, okay? Well, what does that mean? How do you build muscles? My son, he's like 36 years old, man. He is cut. He is big, you know. I always was a cardio man, but he's doing all, you know, the weights and the legs. And, you know, he's doing everything. But I don't even know how to do all that stuff. But he's cut. But how do you grow muscles? So you grow muscles because you're going to go in the gym and do some pull-ups and, you know, I mean, some curls and some, whatever you call them. You're going to use those barbells, okay? Whatever they have for you, the machines. And so what is it that you've done in the course of, say, an hour of working out with those weights? You've destroyed your muscle cells, okay? That's it. And see, then overnight, over a 24-hour period or so, those muscle cells grow back. But when they grow back, they're stronger than they were than the ones that you depleted. And then maybe 2 days later, you're doing your upper body again, and you're working those muscles. You're destroying your muscle cells. That's what you're doing. And then give it another 24-hour period or so, the muscle cells grow back, but they're stronger than they were before. And you keep doing that. That's how you grow big muscles, okay? And that's great from your perspective. I just built these muscles. But take it from the perspective of the muscles themselves. You're killing me. You're destroying them. See, it's all a matter of perspective, okay? And so I'm just suggesting then, as far as a human being, don't look at the destruction, don't look at the failures as being weakness. Look at the failures as paving the way to be more successful the next time. And if you fail again, to be more successful the next time. Keep going. Man, I've watched my wife in business, man. She's an entrepreneur. And I've watched her do businesses ever since we've been married. We've been married for 27 years now. And I've seen her do maybe 7 businesses. Amazing. Doing very well, very successful. But all of them, they had their begin date. They had their, you know, lucrative time, but then they had their end date. And each of them had an end date. But it was like each business she did was better than the last one. But then they had an end date. And then one day, I was like toward the end date of the second to the last business she had, the business prior to the one she's in now, it was like, it was over. She had all this expertise, all this understanding, all this knowledge, but that particular endeavor was coming to a close. And it was like, man, we're like 3 weeks away from the last page. And I got wind of a particular business opportunity opening up. It wasn't even a business opportunity. It was just, I got wind of something that was going on, and I figured I knew her gift, and if she got a hold of this, she could make a business opportunity out of it. Nobody else had thought of it. Right in the midst, man. I left that institution. I wasn't even in the parking lot. I was in the driveway of the parking lot of the building. I called her up on the phone. I said, honey, prepare in this particular way right now. And one of the few times she listened to me. She did it. Man, that was like 7 years ago, man. She has blown this thing up to amazing. She's a recognized figure in this city. Simply because she has the experience of previous experience. I don't want to say necessarily that the business has failed, but they didn't continue on. But she got experience from that business, got experience from this business, got experience from that business. And besides that, she had a good name in all of those businesses. So a name follows you, good name or bad name. So each of those businesses, although they weren't permanent, they each built for her a particular reputation. And so when it came time for this, she's got recognition, she's got name recognition, she has tremendous experience from all of her endeavors, and she has blown this thing up. Man, when I met my wife, she was selling mortgages, you know. Then I watched her, she was paying teachers to tutor kids, you know, that were at risk in their grades off of school hours. And I've seen her do so many things, have summer camps for kids, for just girls, and then for boys and girls. I've seen her do so many things. And now she's got like a preschool, she'll be a kindergarten next year, and she's just an amazing person. And she can do anything, but all of her success was built upon those things that didn't last. So I guess maybe what I'm evolving, maybe the term failure, into simply it didn't last. It didn't last because that's not where you were supposed to end up. And so appreciate it like that. Look at where you are now, where you were, and where you're going to be. And what I'm suggesting now, if it hasn't panned out yet, you just aren't there yet. And so you don't give up. Now what I would suggest is being a good moral person. because you can you need all the help you can get. Whether it's, just the fates, just, what goes around comes around, that biblical principle, or karma, or the chickens coming home to roost. Always do good. Always be the good guy. Don't be mean. Don't be nasty. Don't be vindictive. Don't be that person. Because you reap what you sow, okay? So at the same time, if you fail, if you're feeling fear, you're feeling you dropped the ball or whatever, keep going. Just get up. Remember that old song by that Christian singer, when you fall down, get up. Don't just lay there. You just get up and keep going and learn a lesson from that fall. I'm telling you, you'll get there. The only people who don't make it are the ones who quit. To me, you just haven't made it there yet. And in the process of getting up, begin to reevaluate your life. Are you mean to people? Are you nasty to people? Are you leaving good tips when you go to the restaurant? Do you just decide not to give somebody a tip just because it's carry out? I'm telling you, you need to challenge yourself like that. Are you really a good person? Are you doing everybody good? Do you worry about the immigrants coming across the nation and think they should all be sent back to violence and an economic terrible situation? I'm telling you, man. And I'm just giving you, this isn't even political. I'm just saying you should not be political. Because if you want to be successful, if you want to have a successful business, it depends on where your target market is. Basically, you want everybody to be your customer. You don't want to be harsh. You don't want to be political. You don't want to be harsh or harmful to anyone, because what goes around does come around. You want to be good. So maybe, as part of your getting up process, when you fall down or when you fail, what makes you strong, sort of like when I sat down that day after speaking to those kids and realized that I was more into myself than I was into them. You have to reevaluate. You have to evaluate why you fell down. If you're just falling down and not figuring out why you're failing, continually failing, you're not learning anything. So when you fail, you got homework to do. You got to figure out why you failed. So I'm just saying that's what makes you strong. Failing itself doesn't make you strong. It's the experience, insight, knowledge, and understanding you received why you fell, and even that insight, knowledge, and experience on how to get back up. But if you keep falling and you're failing to recognize why, you're not learning anything, and you're bound to repeat the same thing over and over again. So if you fall and you fail, begin to challenge yourself. Am I being good to everybody? Am I being a nice person? Did I bite off too much, more than I could chew right now? Did I invest too much in my overhead before my business wasn't ready? Was it really a good business idea? Did I have a business plan? Man, with AI now, ChatGPT, at your fingertips, you can plug into ChatGPT, this is what I want to do. And be as specific as possible. It doesn't even have to be necessarily coherent or grammatically correct or even flowing smooth. You can have fragment sentences or whatever. This is what I want to do. What are your suggestions? How can I monetize this? How can I make this prosperous? Give me a business plan. It'll give you a business plan. Give me a mission statement. It'll give you all that kind of stuff. And you can also express, how you tried this and it failed. Why did it fail? How can I make sure it's not going to fail? And plug all that in ChatGPT and hit enter, man. It'll tell you in like 15 seconds. If you're not using ChatGPT on a regular basis, you're probably bound to fail. And that's the reason. So as you're getting up off the floor, as you're dusting yourself off after having failed, if you haven't been using ChatGPT, that's a primary reason why you failed, okay? That's all I'm saying. And I think I've given you enough. Life works. Be good. Have plans that far exceed what seems to be your ability. Have plans that others can't even fathom you attaining, okay? It's okay, and you'll make it work. But when you fall down, each time you fall down, just recognize why you fell down. And make sure and correct that as you continue on this journey. And you'll get to that place where your business will just blow up, will just blossom. You'll see. But anyway, I hope you got something out of that. I do want to thank you once again for joining me for another perspective. And I want to invite you to join me again. You take care. Bye.